We are now going to go to the Breeders, which I guess is a return in some ways because we've got Kim Deal of Pixies fame on this one. And however, the rest of the band is completely detached from that act. But let's talk about what I put into the different things. So in the montage, I put the song OH apostrophe, and now you're going to hear a little bit of Opened.
Float inside the dark black water. Robin flies again. Robin flies again.
So I went a little bit deeper cuts there, guys, not the Spotify first choice right there. Matt, will you run the numbers for me?
I will. Yeah, the Breeders' Pod comes in at number 350 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 27 in 1990, number 1,880 of all time. It is the Breeders' second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1993's Last Splash, which we will be covering in a future episode. Pod did not make Rolling Stone's list, and the Breeders are ranked number 464 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
All right, so the Breeders founded in Dayton, Ohio in 1989, while the aforementioned Kim Deal was still a member of the Pixies. The band, there's a couple different versions of the band. The original version, not the version on this, featured Kim Deal on the rhythm guitar and lead vocals, her twin sister Kelly Deal on lead guitar and vocals as well, Josephine Wiggs on bass guitar, and she sang occasionally, and then Britt Walford was on the drums at the beginning and is on this album as well. He actually was from the band Slint, a band we're going to be covering in the very near future as well in this exact time frame. So there's a lot overlapping, right, of different people. As of 1990, around this album, and she's on this, Tanya Donnelly is also the fifth member of the Breeders at this point. And Tanya Donnelly, this is her middle band. Let's do a little bit of a quiz here, guys. What was Tanya Donnelly's original band before the Breeders?
I know the answer, but I did look it up, and
Okay,
yeah,
then
so
I'll let it. Okay,
yeah.
So Throwing Muses was her original band, and then she would leave the Breeders to form the band Belly, a band I believe we'll be covering later on as well.
Yep, that
so
I know.
That's,
yes.
That's where Tanya Donnelly comes in, and actually later on in the run, Jim McPherson takes over the drums from Britt Walford. So there's a couple different members and along the way. In terms of who was in the band. So the Breeders were a relatively short-lived band. They released 5 albums. Interestingly, 3 of the albums came in reunions. So this one's their first one in 1990. They did Last Splash in 1993. Their next album wasn't until 2002, and then they released an album in 2008 and an album in 2018.
Jeez.
So there's a span there. There were a couple EPs, Safari and Head to Toe, that were released in 1992 and 1994. And I don't know if I've ever seen a band in their comeback release an EP, but the Breeders did Fate to Fatal in 2009. So there are 8 total, I guess what you call pieces of their discography, 5 studio albums and 3 EPs. So if you're seeking them out, that's where you would find them. The Breeders lasted until 1995, and I guess the first thing that I'll mention as a fun fact would be that the Breeders broke up, unfortunately, in their first run when Kelly Deal was actually part of a pretty significant drug bust, and the band went on hiatus after that. Kim Deal created a side project, a pretty good band in their own right, called the Amps with the drummer, McPherson. And then later, you guys will like this, after her drug rehab, Kelly Deal started the Kelly Deal 6000. Was a band. And she also formed the Last Hard Men, which is the name of the band, that featured a Jimmy Chamberlain of the Smashing Pumpkins, their drummer, right? A very, very good drummer. A member of the band The Frogs, as well as Skid Row singer Sebastian Bach was in there.
Wow.
Yep.
Did not have that on my bingo card.
Yep. And Josephine Wiggs later became a producer, and she helped to record and co-produce a Luscious Jackson album later and released a solo album on the Beastie Boys Grand Royal label. So this band's kind of all over the place in terms of the 90s framework of who they're working with at different times. So in that end of things, for those that don't know, the name The Breeders was taken from slang used in the gay community, derogatory slang for heterosexuals, calling them breeders. And Kim Deal heard about it and she found it funny. And she also said to some degree it references, Josh, I don't know if you know this, David Cronenberg's 1979 film The Brood also. Yes. Were you familiar with that?
I didn't. Yes, I know the movie. I didn't know that was referencing, the album was referencing that.
Yep. And Kim Deal has referred to the Breeders as the Bangles from Hell, was how she described the band, which I think is a pretty funny description of what's going on. So there's some fun facts. In terms of genres that the Breeders are considered, there's a zillion different ones, but I think they are considered one of the, the forerunners of 90s alt rock or indie rock, I think would be the two that come up quite a bit. They don't really fall into, other people have tried to kind of by proxy put them into things like Riot Girl and stuff like that, and they were pretty definitive about not wanting to be in any of those scenes. I think they just looked at themselves as a rock band, right? Like a guitar rock band is kind of how they viewed themselves. And obviously this existed. A big part of this was the fact that Kim Deal was shut out of singing on pretty much entirely on a couple Pixies albums in a row. And this was sort of her taking a side project as a chance to expand her creativity, as opposed to just being a bassist. And she is the lead singer here. So a little bit of an... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, another fact, I think they are opening for Olivia Rodrigo right now. She's like a big fan of them, apparently. And yeah, so on tour, Kim Deal and the Breeders are... I don't know if it's the same lineup, but I know like Kim Deal is there.
Well, I know Courtney Barnett in one of their later albums recorded some like backup vocals for one of their later albums. And so, yeah, I guess they're kind of having a third run here if they're opening up for Olivia Rodrigo. So Olivia Rodrigo in some ways is kind of like a tribute act of 90s rock, isn't she? She's like sort of like the thing raised on 90s and early 2000s rock. Isn't that kind of her gig a little bit? So good for her.
Yeah.
Good for you as well. So, so Matt, what'd you think of this one? Breeders. We're in the 90s now, man. This is a 90s album. Yes.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I know that I know Last Splash. I did not know this record, so this was this is a nice listen. And so this album to me rewarded repeated listenings. It is very
1,000%.
Yes. It is very sparse. It is very. This is one of those records that seems like it's a lot of demos. Actually, it's like a lot for a lot of bands. This would kind of, this is the type of sound that you would get when you get the extended deluxe edition, where all the the deep cuts and the demos, because it's just, it's very stripped down and it's like naked, right? Like, and there's lots of songs where the drums are very prominent, up front, and it's not like he's doing a lot of huge drum fills and stuff like that. It's just like boom, chick, boom, like it's like a lot of space. So initially it's kind of like it's hard to kind of find your seating with this, and it's like let it be. You're trying to figure out what's going on, but on repeated listenings you start to see more what they are doing. And by the end of this week, I found myself really enjoying this record. I think it was yesterday, the epiphany happened on the way to work listening to this record. I was like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, I'm glad I'm doing this. So I think the album really picks up. I think this is an album that gets better as it goes along too. I really think, I like the beginning, and I especially like "Happiness Is a Warm Gun," the Beatles cover. That's an example of a good cover, because it's very different than what the Beatles do. It's just it's done in a very Breeders way, and they basically totally almost chop off the final part of that song, and they make it very small and very where in the Beatles song it was like the culmination, the biggest part, So I did like that. But to me, when Hellbound hits, and then When I Was a Painter, Fortunately Gone, Iris is a great song. That's probably the standout track here, I think, for me. It's just, there's just so much there. even in the sparseness of it, there's so much energy and there's so much that they are doing and saying without playing, that when they actually do end up like kicking in like a distorted guitar, it means so much more, right? It's like holding back and then kind of letting loose and playing with that tempo, that back and forth nature of it makes it a really interesting listen. So I love Kim Deal's voice. She's got that, like, it's not a traditional voice. It's kind of at parts she's cracking, there's the cracking of her voice, and and there's a discordant nature to some of these songs, and there's a darker nature to it. There's like kind of like this melancholy, like pain in some places that's happening, but it's just a cool record. I mean, Kim Deal, the Pixies, the Breeders, there's just the Belly, but this is I have both of the Belly albums that came out. I think we're going to cover at least one of them here in the run of the podcast. But
Star and King, right?
Star and King, right? So they're all kind of in this vein. It's very similar in this, but and it was the same thing with Last Splash. Like, I remember, well, I'll get to the take on that when we do that, but it's you don't just listen to this album once and be like, okay, I got it, right? And if you do that, you could just walk away going, that album sucked, I kind of want to listen to that again, right? But repeated listenings are definitely the way to go for this, and I liked it the more I listened to it, so I'm thumbs up on it.
Yeah, we're in lockstep, because I felt the exact same way. I thought it was such a slow build for me the first time through. It didn't really impress me. I wrote down that this album feels so disaffected and like uninterested in making good music that I didn't really.
It's like Gen X in music form.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like a Gen
exactly.
X. Yeah.
It's like, don't want to sell out, man, so I'm not going to even make music that sounds like we're trying or something. And
I'm too much of a slacker.
Yeah. But then, like you said, Matt, like even that Happiness Is a Warm Gun didn't really impress me the first time around, and I was like, okay, well, it's not so. I'd rather listen to the Beatles version, but that's one of my favorite songs. So anyway, then once Hellbound hit, I was like, okay, this song is really good. I thought this was the song that kind of like hooked me, and then it really like carried me through all the way to the rest of the album. And the album's short anyway, it's like 35 minutes or something. But yeah, that coupled with When I Was a Painter, they had these like really interesting little guitar parts, and so I warmed up to it, and I still wasn't completely sold the first time through, but then when I listened to it again, I really kind of got on its wavelength, and like, I don't know, somehow like tuned in to the vibe that they were going for. And I like their delivery. I like when both Deal sisters are kind of like on Happiness Is a Warm Gun, when she's saying bang bang shoot shoot in the background, like that kind of like I found charming. And there's like, I don't know, there's like really good little guitar parts, and the sparseness, like you mentioned, Matt, is like does kind of really work for me on this. And I don't know, just kind of the combination of everything I really warmed up to. And other tracks we haven't mentioned that I really liked are Limehouse. That's the second to last track. I thought that was really strong. And even Metal Man, which is the last track, I liked as well. But yeah, overall, this album really ended up winning me over. And I still don't really like the first song that much, but everything else I think is pretty strong, and I became impressed with. So thumbs up for me on this one.
Yeah, it's interesting because Glorious is a song that sounds like a Pixies song in a lot of ways when you think about it, in terms of the start-stop tempo. And
yeah,
it's so funny. Like I could have written the same thing you guys did. The first time I did this, I was like, oh, this is like not. I was like, I remember liking Last Splash quite a bit, and I'm like, ooh, this is like not a good rough draft of what they're doing. It just feels very incomplete and very unfinished. I wouldn't say I thought it was stripped down necessarily. I just felt it was rudimentary, would be the way I'd describe it, and not rudimentary in the way that, say, something like the Slits were, right, where I immediately recognized that the minimalism was part of the appeal, right? I'm like, oh, okay, I get it completely in terms of what we're going for here. It was sort of like not minimalist enough to be minimalist, but also not complicated enough to draw me in or have hooks or anything to bring me in. But much like you guys, as I listened to it the second time, I started to appreciate it a little bit more. And what really brought me in was the drumming. And we haven't covered Slint yet, but as I listened to it, I was like, man, there's a lot of bass drum here, a lot of bass drum being used, and a lot of rim shots along the way, which is not a style you hear throughout a song and throughout an album. You might hear it on a song here and there, or in a part of a song where it stands out. And I guess that is part of, in this case, the drummer. We haven't, like I said, we haven't done Slint yet, so I'll be curious to see if he carries it over. But it sounds like he does.
What's
his
rim
drumming
shot,
style?
John?
It's do you know? So in the songs where it's like, you know, that like sound kind of in a drum, like hitting the rim of the cymbal a little bit is the best way to put it, to create sort of like that really quick like sound that sort of is piercing along the way is the best way I could describe it. And the bass drum is, you know, what does a bass drum sound like? Like this album. Like that would be how I describe the bass drum. And I think in particular, I was reading that he uses the 1 and 3 bass drum quite a bit. But that was what brought me in. I have also always liked Kim Deal's voice and the harmonies with her sister. They sound similar, but there's just enough variation that you know who's singing when they're singing.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, it wore me down. I only had planned to listen to this album twice, but because the second time I was like, ooh, I started to grow to it. I wonder how the third listen will go. Will it take it forward for me more? And yeah, the third listen was better than the first and second. I still don't know if I'd call this an album I loved. I do feel very much that it is a rough draft for what's to come. It feels like them stretching their wings a little bit and figuring out how everything comes together. You're right, Matt. You see skeletal remains of what comes in Last Splash. You see the framework of what comes in Belly. You absolutely could tell people involved with both of those bands are involved with this band without even necessarily being told. And that's why, like I said, I keep saying this, but I'm curious to hear that Slint, I think it's called Spiderland, is the album we're going to cover, because I'm completely unfamiliar with that album. And yeah, and the other takeaway I had was, boy, this is 90s alt rock. The sound of 90s alt rock, the energy of 90s alt rock. It really puts you, we talked about time and place, but I guess you're sort of trained to think that, you know, 90s alt rock didn't come till Nevermind, right, in 91. But this just goes to show that it was already here, right? And really, this is the connective tissue between the Pixies and what Nirvana's doing, because this falls right in between. It's actually contemporary for both of them. And I know Kurt Cobain loved this album and loved the Breeders in general. And so it all pieces together the story. And that's why I love listening to these albums, and especially going chronologically now, because we start to see the tapestry play out in front of it. And I think this was a really important album for me to listen to. I'd only listened to it once way back in the day, and I can't say that much stuck from when I listened to it before. So it was almost like a brand new listen for me as I listened to it. And yeah, I would give this somewhere between a slight thumbs up and a full thumbs up, like a 3/4 thumbs up, right? Comfortably a thumbs up, but not, you know, the definitive, like, I love this album or I really love this album. That's where it falls for me.
I bet you, and I would venture to guess that even if you gave it more time, it could get up there. Like, this is one of those, it might not, but this is one of those records that it could even, you know, rise higher the more you listen to it. Because
I don't know for me, because I feel like I gave it all the listens that I don't. Rarely does an album not make that move for me after the third listen. Like after the third listen, it can get slightly, but it doesn't. If it hasn't got there by the third listen, it usually doesn't move into a level much above where I have it at that point. But the biggest jump for me historically, Matt, is between the first and second listen, and then sometimes the second and third. That's where albums take the biggest jump for me.
Yeah, sometimes for me it's like the fourth to fifth or fifth. Okay. I like to go. Yeah, it takes.
Yeah, albums can gain ground in there, but not nearly at the level they do. If you haven't got me by the third listen, it's rare that I ever double back and get it. Yeah.
Oh. Go ahead, Josh.
I was just gonna say too. I wonder if, I don't know Last Splash, so I wonder what the evolution, and like you said, maybe it's just like they refine their sound, and that's like a.
Well, you certainly know one song off that album, Josh.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. by name.
Well, I mean, you know Cannonball, don't you? I mean, that was a gigantic freaking
I think so.
massive song. Okay, yeah.
I'd have
know
to
that.
hear it.
And just to clarify, I think Kelly Deal is not in the band at this time. So any
Right.
harmony or any other vocals you're hearing is not her. It's either,
Is it not her? Is it Tanya Donley? I apologize.
Yeah,
Is it
no,
Tanya
Kelly's.
Donley?
It's got to be right, or it could be Kim Deal like if she's doing both vocals. But yeah, I'm looking at Tanya Donnelly backing vocals, and also Josephine Wiggs.
Well,
who's the bass
so
player.
the
She
reading
does
I
backing
did said
vocals,
that.
too.
Yeah, she did back. I read though that she was the fifth piece, Kelly Deal, but was she in between?
I'm
this
just looking
album?
at the person. I don't think she was a member of the band yet. I think she took over for. She kind of bridged Tanya
So
Donnelly.
it says
She took over.
1990s. So the thing I'm reading, 1990s pod. Deal and Donnelly recruited bassist Josephine Wiggs of The Perfect Disaster and drummer Britt Wolford of Slint. Kim's sister Kelly was brought into the band as a third guitarist in 1992. Okay, yeah, you're right, Matt. She was brought in 92 for the Safari EP. So
Yeah,
came
she's
later,
on
so-
that EP and that's the only time she and Donnelly appear in a recording together because Donnelly's gone
Interesting.
for Last Splash. So
So when you think of, when you think of Last Splash, you think of those harmony lyrics, but they sound remarkably similar to what the harmony lyrics on the, but when you think about it, Tanya Donnelly's voice isn't that different than Kim Deal's voice or Kelly Deal. Okay, so I wish I could go back in time and erase that. Then I apologize for the confusion there. So
well, they're also like. I mean, the Breeders weren't really known for this record. They were known for Last Splash, and that's Kelly Deal and Kim Deal. I mean, they're identical twins, aren't they? I mean, it's like they're very synonymous with each other being in this band. So it's understandable.
well,
that
and remember, I think if I
remember.
remember in the Pixies biography, the Pixies were entertaining bringing in Kelly Deal around Bossa Nova
For the drummer,
time, right?
They wanted her to be the drummer,
Oh, right.
but
You mentioned that.
yeah, but she actually Frank Black wanted her in the band, but she felt like she didn't have the chops, so she declined.
Well, and before she joined the Breeders, Kelly Deal had never played the guitar, which makes her similar to her sister, right? Who famously hadn't played the bass before she
Right.
joined the. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Two members of a band just pick up an instrument and play it perfunctory.
See, there's still hope for us, guys.
Yeah, if we could start, sure.
Maybe a rock band.
Yeah.
To start there. So, all right. So we have 3 thumbs up, it sounds like.
Yep.
For sure.
Okay, Matt, you've promised us quite
Oh my
the bio
God,
here
yeah.
for this next group. I'm going to turn it over to you and shut up for a while.
Yeah, so this is the KLF with their album Chill Out. And the opening montage, you heard a clip from Wichita Lineman was a song I once heard. And now you're going to hear a clip from 3 a.m. Somewhere Out of Beaumont.